Every morning for 5 years now, I woke up to an empty bed. Lavinia always got up before me, and by the time I opened my eyes, there was the smell of freshly brewed coffee coming from the kitchen. Now I make my own coffee. I do it slowly, as if stretching out the ritual. 3 tablespoons of ground coffee, 200 milliliters of water, a pinch of salt, just the way Lavinia used to make it. Coffee never turned out like hers. My name is Oberon Hollis. I'm 78 years old and I live alone in a small one-story house in West Fargo, North Dakota. After 45 years as an accountant, I retired. A year later, Lavinia died. A sudden stroke. The doctors said she wasn't in agony. I still don't know if that was true or another lie for the greater good. Our only daughter, Beatrice, did not attend the funeral. She had an important business meeting in Chicago that she said there was no way she could cancel. She flew in 3 days after neighbors and a few friends and I had buried Lavinia. Beatrice said she was sorry, gave me a dry, formal hug, and asked if I was going to sell the house. "I think it's too big for one person," she said then, standing in the middle of the living room. "Besides, you're not young anymore. Maybe you should think about a nursing home." Lavinia always said our daughter was practical. I preferred another word, calculating. That day was the first time I said it out loud. "Your mother is not yet cold in the grave, and you are already calculating how much you can get for our house." Beatrice looked at me with an expression as if I had said something indecent. She didn't stay the night, saying she had booked a hotel room. We didn't see her for almost a year after that. Beatrice works as an insurance agent for some big firm. Her husband Thornton is a civil engineer who designs bridges. They moved to West Fargo 10 years ago when his company won a contract to build in our area. Before that, they lived in Boston, and Lavinia and I only saw our grandchildren on holidays. When they moved in, my wife and I rejoiced. Lavinia said, "Now we're going to be a real family." For the first few months we were. We helped them get settled in, babysat their grandchildren, twins Hazel and Reginald. They were 9 years old then. Now they are 19 and I haven't seen them in 3 years. They are attending college on the East Coast. Relations with Beatrice and Thornton began to deteriorate shortly before Lavinia's death. They stopped inviting us over less and less, stopped bringing the kids. When we called, there was always a reason: work, school, errands. Lavinia was worried, but she tried not to show it. "They are busy. They have their own lives," she said, though I could see her secretly wiping away tears as she looked at pictures of her grandchildren. After my wife died, I became something like an ATM machine for them. Beatrice only called or stopped by when she needed money, whether it was to pay for the twins' college tuition, to fix up the house, or for a new car for Thornton. I never said no. She was my own daughter. Besides, Lavinia and I have always been frugal. I have enough savings to last me the rest of my life, even if I live to be 100. But every time I wrote a check, I felt used. That day, 8 months ago, when they bought the house, I gave them $50,000 for a down payment. Beatrice said she'd make me a co-borrower. "It'll be easier to get the bank approved, and you can come visit us anytime you want because it'll be your house too." I agreed. The lawyer drew up the papers and I signed them, not really reading them. I remember Thornton looking across the table at me, wary, as if afraid I might change my mind. I didn't. Since then, I've never crossed the threshold of their new home. All my calls went to voicemail. Messages went unanswered. On those rare occasions when Beatrice did answer, the conversation was short and dry. "Sorry, Dad, I can't talk right now. I'll call you back later." She never called back. This morning started as usual. I brewed coffee, made peanut butter toast, and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper. The house was quiet, with only the old wall clock, a wedding gift from Lavinia's parents, counting down the seconds. I was about to start the crossword puzzle when the phone rang. "Dad? It's Beatrice." I felt my heart clench. My daughter was calling me on her own without reminding me or asking me. That could only mean one thing. She needed something. "Good morning, Beatrice. It's good to hear from you. Thornton and I have decided to go to the coast next month, for 2 weeks. Thought you might like to join us." I almost dropped my cup. It's the first time I've been invited anywhere in 5 years. "To the coast?" I asked, not believing my ears. "Yes, in Maine. We have a cottage booked near Kennebunkport. 3 bedrooms, ocean view. Thornton says the fishing's great there. I was never much of a fisherman, and Beatrice knew it. Lavinia loved to fish. We often went to a local lake where she could sit for hours with a rod and I would read a book in the shade of a tree. After she died, I sold all the fishing gear." "Sounds wonderful," I said, wondering what the catch was. "But why all of a sudden?" "We just thought you could use a change of scenery," she said, a touch of irritation in her voice. "You hardly ever leave the house. You can't stay inside all the time." It was true. After Lavinia died, my world had shrunk to the size of my house and the nearest supermarket. Sometimes I'd go to the park to feed the ducks, but lately even that had become difficult. My knees weren't the same anymore. "When do you plan to go?" 3 weeks from today. The 15th. We can pick you up on the way. We'll take your passport, credit card, and some clothes. You don't need anything else. The cottage has everything you need." Something in her words made me wary. She was too detailed. But on the other hand, maybe I really am too suspicious. Maybe they'd finally decided to patch things up. "Okay," I said after a pause. "I'll go with you." "Good." Beatrice's voice was visibly cheerful. "Then I'll see you on the 15th. Be ready at 8 o'clock in the morning." She hung up without waiting for my answer. I sat staring at the phone for a long time. Part of me was excited about the upcoming trip, the opportunity to spend time with my daughter. The other part, the part that had become much more cynical after all those years of neglect, was waiting for a catch. 3 weeks flew by. I packed as Beatrice had asked. Passport, credit card, a few sets of clothes, medications. I decided to take cash, just in case. $1,000 was in an envelope in the breast pocket of my shirt. On the day of departure, I woke up at 6 in the morning, although Beatrice said to be ready by 8. I couldn't sleep with excitement. I made coffee, ate breakfast, and sat at the living room window looking out at the driveway. The minute hand of the wall clock made circle after circle. 8, 8:30, 9. At 9:30, I started to worry. Maybe they'd had an accident? Maybe they forgot? I was about to call when a shiny black SUV pulled into the driveway. Beatrice got out of the car, elegant in a light-colored pantsuit. Thornton stayed behind the wheel, keeping the engine running. "Sorry I'm late, Dad," she said, entering the house without knocking. "Traffic on the way out of town. Are you ready?" I nodded, pointing to the small suitcase by the door. "I've been waiting a long time." "Great," she gave me an assessing look. "Please tell me you're not going to ride in those pants." I looked at my old but clean and ironed gray pants. "What's wrong with them?" Beatrice rolled her eyes, a gesture she had adopted from her mother as a teenager. "They look like they're 100 years old. Don't you have anything decent?" "These are my best pants," I answered, feeling the familiar irritation rising inside. "If they make you uncomfortable, I can stay home." "Okay, whatever." She waved her hand. "We'll take what we've got. Thornton's waiting, so hurry up." She took my suitcase and headed for the door. I took one last look around the house, made sure all the appliances were off, and locked the door. When I got to the car, Thornton didn't even turn his head in my direction. He sat staring out the windshield, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. "Good morning, Thornton," I said, climbing into the back seat. "Uh-huh," he mumbled back. "Everybody in? Can we go?" Beatrice nodded, getting into the front passenger seat. Thornton started the car without waiting for me to buckle up. "It's about an 18-hour drive," Beatrice said without turning around. "We'll stop for the night somewhere along the way. Did you bring your medicine?" "Of course," I answered. "I'm not a child." She didn't answer. I watched my house get smaller and smaller in the back window of the car, and a strange feeling came over me, like it was the last time I'd ever see it. I pushed that thought away. 2 weeks with my family ahead, a chance to bond, to grow closer. Maybe Beatrice and Thornton had finally decided to change their attitudes toward me. I made myself comfortable in the back seat and prepared for the long drive, hopeful but not without anxiety. Somewhere deep inside, I knew things weren't as easy as they seemed, but I desperately wanted to believe that my daughter had finally remembered that she had a father, that I meant more to her than just a source of financial support. I wanted to believe that this trip was the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. We pulled onto the highway and I watched the familiar scenery of North Dakota whiz by. Beatrice and Thornton talked quietly in the front seats, too quietly for me to make out the words. Sometimes they laughed, and I caught myself thinking I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard my daughter laugh. I closed my eyes, lulled by the monotonous noise of the engine and the thought that maybe things could still be fixed. Perhaps this trip was what we all needed. The first 2 hours of the ride passed in silence. I stared out the window at the fields and the occasional farmhouse. Thornton drove the car with concentration, and Beatrice typed something into her phone. Every once in a while, she'd show her husband the screen and they'd exchange short remarks, too quiet for me to make out. "How are the twins?" I asked, trying to start a conversation. I hadn't heard from them in a while. Beatrice, still on the phone, answered, "Fine, they're studying. Hazel has a new boyfriend, some musician. And Reginald? Does he still want to be a doctor?" "I think so," she shrugged. "He's taking a chemistry class right now. He says it's hard." Thornton chuckled. If he hung out less and studied more, it wouldn't be so hard. I wanted to say that at their age it was normal to study and hang out, as Thornton put it, but I didn't. Over the years, I've learned that any comments I make about parenting are taken in stride. "Should we stop for a bite to eat?" I asked after another hour. "I could buy you lunch." Beatrice turned around. "Dad, we left only 3 hours ago. Are you hungry yet?" "No, I was just thinking." "We were planning to stop 2 hours later in Minneapolis," Thornton interrupted me. "There's a decent restaurant there, recommended by a colleague." "Of course. I'm sorry." I leaned back in my seat, feeling like a delinquent child. Beatrice went back to her phone, and I went back to looking at the scenery outside the window. Suddenly the car slowed and Thornton pulled over. "What happened?" Beatrice asked worriedly. "I need to stretch," and he looked meaningfully at his wife. "Check the map." They got out of the car, leaving me inside. I saw them walk a few meters away and begin to argue animatedly. Thornton was gesticulating irritably. Beatrice was arguing passionately. I could not hear the words, but it was clear from their faces that the conversation was not pleasant. They glanced back at the car several times, and I looked away hastily, pretending not to notice them. About 5 minutes later, they returned. Thornton got behind the wheel, slamming the door shut with force. "Is everything all right?" I asked cautiously. "Fine," Beatrice said. We drove the rest of the way to Minneapolis in tense silence. We stopped at the Silver Spoon restaurant, a fancy place with a pretension to haute cuisine. Beatrice insisted I leave my tattered jacket in the car. "They have a dress code, Daddy," she said, as if she were explaining the obvious to a child. I obeyed, though I felt uncomfortable without my jacket. The restaurant's air conditioning was on full blast. We were escorted to a table by the window. A young waiter in a snow-white shirt handed us leather-covered menus. I could hardly make out the names of the dishes. The font was small, and I had left my glasses in my jacket. "Have you made up your mind?" Beatrice asked after a minute. "Not yet," I squinted, trying to read the description of some salmon dish. "Maybe you should choose something simpler," Thornton suggested. "Soup of the day or pasta?" "I'd like fish," I said stubbornly. Beatrice rolled her eyes. "Dad, you know you have stomach problems. Remember the last time you got sick after eating seafood?" Last time? What is she talking about? I haven't had seafood with them in years, and I don't have any stomach problems. Beatrice, you're confused. You better order the pasta. She slammed the menu down. Thornton, have you chosen? And so began a series of petty humiliations. They ordered me pasta when I wanted fish. They chose water instead of the wine I asked for. When the waiter brought the food, Beatrice asked me to cut my pasta into small pieces to make it more convenient for Daddy. I'm perfectly capable of handling my own food, I said, feeling the color flood my face. Sure you are, Daddy. She patted my hand with that condescending smile usually reserved for cranky children or old people out of their minds. Thornton grinned openly. I wouldn't want a repeat of that incident at the Olive Garden. Remember, darling, when your father dropped spaghetti on his shirt and we had to buy him a new one? Oh yes, Beatrice laughed. It was so embarrassing. I looked at them in bewilderment. There was no incident at the Olive Garden. I hadn't been to the restaurant with them in years. They were making up these stories to make me look like a feeble old man. It never happened, I said firmly. Dad, come on. Beatrice continued to smile, but there was a twinkle of irritation in her eyes. You just forgot. It's normal at your age. I wanted to object, but I realized it was useless. Instead, I silently began to eat my pasta, chewing not so much the food as the resentment. After lunch, we continued on our way. This time, Beatrice took the wheel, and Thornton sat next to me in the back seat. He opened his laptop and immersed himself in his work, completely ignoring my presence. By late afternoon, we reached a small town in Wisconsin where we planned to spend the night. Beatrice had booked 2 rooms at a roadside motel, one for herself and Thornton, the other for me. Make yourself comfortable, Dad, she said, handing me the key. Thornton and I are going to have dinner at the bar across the street. I could join you, I suggested. You better get some rest, Thornton cut him off. It's a long day tomorrow. They left, leaving me alone in a featureless room with worn carpet and a bedspread that smelled of cheap detergent. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling fatigue and frustration pile up on my shoulders. What am I doing here? Why did I agree to this trip? In the morning, they knocked on my door at 7 o'clock. Hurry up, Dad, Beatrice shouted. We have to leave in 30 minutes. I washed and dressed and went out to the car. Thornton was already behind the wheel, tapping his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. Good morning, I said, climbing into the back seat. Uh-huh, he mumbled back. Everybody ready to go? Let's go. Beatrice handed me a paper bag. We got you breakfast, cinnamon bun and coffee. Thank you. I was touched by the gesture. Maybe it wasn't so bad. I took a sip of the coffee and grimaced. It was cold and tasteless. The bun was stale. The day passed in monotonous traffic on the highway. We only stopped for gas and the restroom. Every time I asked for a stop, Thornton sighed irritably, and Beatrice said we were already behind schedule. By the evening of the second day, we reached Kennebunkport. The cottage they had rented turned out to be a spacious 2-story house overlooking the ocean. 3 bedrooms, living room with fireplace, fully equipped kitchen. Everything looked expensive and elegant. Your room is upstairs, last door on the right, Beatrice said, handing me the key. Make yourself comfortable. Dinner is at 8. I walked up the stairs, dragging my suitcase with difficulty. No one offered to help, though Thornton easily carried 4 huge suitcases. My room was the smallest in the house, with a narrow bed and a view of the neighbor's garage instead of the ocean. I unpacked, showered, and went downstairs for dinner. Beatrice and Thornton were sitting on the patio, sipping wine. There were 3 plates of pasta and salad on the table. Ah, Papa, Beatrice raised her glass. How do you like the room? It's nice, I lied. Thank you. We thought you'd be more comfortable on the second floor, Thornton said. Quiet. I didn't bother reminding him that, at my age, climbing stairs several times a day wasn't the most pleasant thing to do. Instead, I sat down at the table in silence and began to eat. Thornton and I are going to the winery tomorrow, Beatrice announced. A tasting tour. You'll probably want to stay here and rest, won't you? It wasn't a question. Actually, I'd love to see the winery, I said. Beatrice and Thornton exchanged glances. It's a long tour, Dad, Beatrice said softly. A lot of walking, and the tasting. It doesn't go well with your medication. I can skip the tasting, I insisted, and I'm perfectly capable of walking. Listen, Oberon, Thornton put down his fork. The tickets have already been purchased. The group is limited. We can't add you at the last minute. I understand. I lowered my eyes to my plate, feeling a wave of anger and resentment rising inside. Don't feel bad, Dad. Beatrice patted my arm. We'll bring you a nice bottle of wine. I didn't say anything. Dinner ended in awkward silence. This is how the first 3 days of our family vacation went. Beatrice and Thornton would leave in the morning, then to the winery, then to yachting, then to golf, and return late in the evening. I stayed alone in the cottage, wandering the beach, reading old magazines found in the living room, and wondering why they had invited me at all. On the 4th day, they announced that we were going to a restaurant that evening. All of us. It's a very nice restaurant, Daddy, Beatrice said. You should wear something decent. I put on my only suit, the one I'd buried Lavinia in. It was baggy. I'd lost a lot of weight in 5 years, but it was the best I had. When I came down to the living room, Beatrice grimaced. Daddy, that suit, it looks like a funeral. It does, I replied dryly. It's my funeral suit. Thornton chuckled. At least it's black. You can't tell how old it is in the dark. The restaurant turned out to be a swanky place overlooking the ocean. The maitre d' escorted us to a table by the window. I could feel the stares of the other diners' elegant couples in expensive clothes, and felt even more acutely how ridiculous I looked in my baggy suit. Beatrice had ordered an aperitif for everyone, a fancy gin cocktail. Daddy, you'll like it, she said. It's not strong. I wanted to argue that I didn't drink gin, but I didn't. When the menu arrived, I found that the prices were only on Thornton's menu. Order me a steak, please, I asked my son-in-law. Medium rare. Steak? Beatrice shook her head. Dad, you know you can't have red meat. The doctor said, What doctor? I was beginning to lose my patience. I hadn't been to a doctor in 6 months, and no one had told me not to eat red meat. Don't make a scene, Beatrice whispered, smiling at the waiter who was just coming to take my order. He wants steamed fish fillets, no salt, she said, and vegetables. I sat clenching my fists under the table. What's going on? Why are they doing this? When the food arrived, Thornton pulled out his phone. I need to take a picture for the twins. They asked me to show them how we vacation. He raised the phone, pointing the camera at Beatrice and me. Smile, Daddy, my daughter commanded. I tried to smile, but I felt like I was making a grimace. How about another one? Thornton suggested. You look like... He paused, but I knew what he meant. Like an old man who'd been dragged to this dinner by force. Excuse me, I said, getting up. I have to go to the restroom. In the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, staring at my reflection. When did I get so old? When did my daughter start treating me like a burden? What had I done wrong? Returning to the table, I found Beatrice and Thornton chatting animatedly with a couple at a neighboring table, an elegant woman about Beatrice's age and a man in an expensive suit. Ah, Papa, Beatrice turned to me. This is Elizabeth and Richard. They are also vacationing here. Nice to meet you, I nodded. Oberon came with us from West Fargo, Beatrice explained. We decided he shouldn't be alone at his age. Oh, how kind of you, Elizabeth said. My father is old too, but he refuses to travel. He says you can't replant old trees. You're lucky your father is so easygoing, Richard said to Beatrice. My father-in-law is a tyrant. He can't get me out of his house. He's never satisfied. Oh, our father has a temper too. Beatrice looked at me meaningfully. Right, Dad? I silently picked at the tasteless fish with my fork. "You know," Beatrice continued, "sometimes I feel more like a mother than a daughter. I have to make sure that he takes his medicine, that he eats right. Yesterday I caught him trying to pour himself a whiskey with his blood pressure." I froze. That was an outright lie. I haven't had whiskey in years, preferring a glass of wine with dinner, and there's nothing wrong with my blood pressure. "Beatrice," I began, but she continued, ignoring me. "And last week he almost started a fire in the kitchen, forgot to turn off the stove." "That's not true," I raised my voice. "I haven't been in your house in months." Beatrice smiled indulgently. "You see, my memory's not what it used to be. You were at dinner last Friday night, Dad." "No, I wasn't." I felt my hands shaking. "You know that very well." "Dad, don't start," she said with a steely tone in her voice. "I'm sorry," she said to Elizabeth and Richard. "He can be difficult sometimes." "Oh, we understand." Elizabeth nodded sympathetically. "Old age is no fun." I stared at them all, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. They were talking about me like I wasn't here, or as if I were no longer a person, but an inanimate object, a burden to be taken care of. "Excuse me." I stood up abruptly from the table. "I need some air." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The ocean breeze hit my face, bringing with it the smell of salt and seaweed. I inhaled deeply, trying to calm myself down. What's going on? Why is Beatrice lying about my condition? Why are they making me look like an infirm old man out of his mind? And then it hit me. They want something. Something they can only get if I look incapacitated. Money? A house? Guardianship? I stood on the boardwalk, looking out at the dark water, and suddenly felt very alone and vulnerable. What if they really are trying to declare me incapacitated? What if this trip is just part of their plan? "Dad?" Beatrice's voice brought me out of my reverie. She was standing next to me, wrapped in a shawl. "Are you all right?" "Why are you lying about my health?" I asked her bluntly. "I'm not lying." She put her hand on my shoulder. "It's just that you forget a lot of things. That's normal at your age." "I wasn't at your house for dinner last week," I said firmly, "and I didn't try to pour myself a whiskey, and nothing happened to the stove." Beatrice sighed. "Daddy, let's not make a scene. Elizabeth and Richard have invited us to dinner at their house tomorrow. It'll be embarrassing if you keep acting like this." "I'm not going out with you," I said. "In fact, I think I'd better go home." "Don't be silly." She squeezed my shoulder tighter. "How will you get back? Take a cab to West Fargo?" She laughed as if I'd said something incredibly funny. "Let's go back. Thornton's already paid. There's a car waiting for us." I realized I had no choice, at least not now. I obediently followed my daughter to the exit of the promenade, where Thornton and his cab were waiting for us. I sat in silence in the car, staring out the window at the lights of the coastal town floating by. Beatrice and Thornton were talking quietly in the front seat. I could hear bits and pieces of phrases. "It's too soon. We should wait a couple more days. He's starting to suspect something." I felt a chill run down my spine. They were up to something to do with me. And whatever it was, it didn't bode well for me. Back at the cottage, I went up to my room, locked myself in, and lay on the bed without undressing. Sleep did not come. I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what was going on. One thing I knew for sure was that I had to stay alert. Beatrice and Thornton were up to something, and I had to be ready. I woke up to the sound of the front door slamming. The sun was already high in the sky, and the clock on my bedside table read almost 10 in the morning. Strange, I usually woke up much earlier. It must have been the sleepless night and all the worries of the last few days. When I went downstairs, I found the living room empty. There was a note on the kitchen table, written in Beatrice's neat handwriting. "Daddy, Thornton and I went on a field trip to a neighboring town. We'll be back late tonight. There are sandwiches in the refrigerator for lunch. Don't miss us. B. I opened the fridge. Indeed, there was a plate with 2 sandwiches wrapped in food wrap on the shelf. I wasn't hungry, so I just poured myself a glass of orange juice and went out onto the terrace. The day promised to be beautiful. Cloudless skies, a light breeze off the ocean, the cries of seagulls. In another situation, I would have enjoyed this morning, but now all my thoughts were occupied with Beatrice and Thornton's strange behavior. I decided to take a walk on the beach. Maybe the fresh air would help me make sense of the situation. When I got back to my room, I changed into more appropriate clothes for the walk, grabbed my wallet, and left the house. The beach was only a 5-minute walk away. Despite the beautiful weather, there weren't many people. A few families with kids, a couple of elderly people walking their dog, and a lone surfer surfing the waves. I found a vacant bench overlooking the ocean and sat down, exposing my face to the sunlight. As time passed, I sat there, lost in thought. Something was bothering me. Beatrice's note seemed too ordinary after last night's incident at the restaurant. Not a word of apology, not a hint of our conversation. It was as if nothing had happened. By noon, I was hungry and decided to go back to the cottage for sandwiches. As I got up from the bench, I discovered that my wallet had fallen out of my pocket. Luckily, it was lying nearby on the sand. I picked it up and machine-checked the contents. There was no credit card. I double-checked all the compartments, shook out the contents on the bench. The card was nowhere to be found. There was cash, though. The same $1,000 I had thoughtfully brought with me. I was sure the card had been in my wallet when I left the house, so Beatrice or Thornton had taken it while I was asleep. I felt a wave of anger rising inside. Why did they need my credit card? If they needed money, they could have just asked. I'd never said no to Beatrice. Back at the cottage, the first thing I did was check my suitcase. All of my belongings were in place, but something in their arrangement said that someone had been rummaging through my things. The passport I had kept in the inside pocket of my suitcase was now under a stack of shirts. I sat down on the bed, trying to gather my thoughts. What was going on? Why would Beatrice and Thornton want my credit card and passport? And then it hit me. They were going to leave me. Everything fell into place. The strange looks, the whispers, the sudden hospitality after years of neglect. They'd brought me here, to an unfamiliar city thousands of kilometers from home, to leave me without funds or papers. I rushed to the window and looked out the driveway, hoping to see their car. Maybe they hadn't left yet. But the driveway was empty. I sank down onto the couch, feeling panic overwhelm me. What am I going to do? I'm in an unfamiliar city with no transportation and limited cash. Beatrice and Thornton have my credit card and passport. My first thought was to go to the police. But what would I say? That my daughter and son-in-law stole my credit card? That they abandoned me in a resort town? It sounded so ridiculous that I doubted anyone would believe me. Besides, knowing Beatrice, she must have prepared some story about my incapacity and memory problems. I decided to act on my own. First, I had to find out where I was and how to get to the nearest airport or bus station. In the hallway, I found a tourist brochure with a map of Kennebunkport. Judging by it, it was about 3 kilometers to the city center. There must be a tourist office there that could help me. I quickly packed the things I needed, documents, cash, a change of clothes, into a small bag I found in the closet. The rest would have to be left behind. Locking the house, I decided to take the key with me. A petty revenge, but still, I set off. The drive to the city center took almost an hour. Despite the good weather, I was quickly tired, the effect of age and all the worries. At the tourist office, I was met by a friendly young woman. "What can I do for you?" she asked me with a smile. "I need to get to West Fargo, North Dakota," I said. "What's the fastest way to do that?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "West Fargo? That's pretty far. You'd have to go to Portland, get on a plane to Minneapolis, and then take another flight to Fargo. How do you get to Portland? There's a bus that runs 3 times a day. The next one is in 2 hours. I nodded. How much is the ticket? $35 one way. I mentally calculated with the bus, cab to the airport, airfare, food, and maybe a hotel. If I couldn't get a flight out the same day, most of my cash would be gone. But there was no choice. Where can I buy a bus ticket? Right here. She pointed to the small window of the ticket office in the corner of the office. But you'll need an ID. My heart dropped. My passport, which was my primary identification, was still in Beatrice's possession. I rummaged through my wallet, my driver's license. I'd forgotten all about it since I'd stopped driving years ago when my eyesight began to fail. I have a driver's license, I said, relieved to pull out a plastic card. That's enough, the girl nodded. After buying a bus ticket, I went to a small cafe across from the bus station. I had almost 2 hours before departure, and I decided to use that time to gather my thoughts and make a plan of action. Sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, I allowed myself to truly realize what had happened for the first time in a while. My own daughter had abandoned me in a strange place, thousands of kilometers from home, taking my documents and credit card. My son-in-law, who had never made much of a secret of his disdain for me, must have been the mastermind behind this plan. But why? What did they want to accomplish by doing this? The only thing that came to mind was money. They wanted access to my savings. Maybe they were planning to declare me incompetent, but that would require medical reports, doctor's certificates, or, they were counting on me not being able to come home, that I'd stay here in a foreign city without resources or connections. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that their plan hadn't been well thought out. They didn't take into account that I had any cash left. They didn't take my driver's license. They hadn't considered that I could seek help from the local authorities or the bank to block the card. This told me that the decision to abandon me had been made spontaneously, perhaps after last night's incident at the restaurant. I began to understand their logic. They had brought me here, hoping for something. What? But my behavior last night had thrown their plans into disarray. So they decided to get rid of me. The bus to Portland was half empty. I sat by the window, watching the coastal landscape change to rolling hills. The ride took about an hour, and the whole time I couldn't stop thinking about Beatrice. Where had I gone wrong in her upbringing? When had my little girl, whom Lavinia and I loved so much, turned into a calculating and heartless woman? In Portland, I went straight to the airport. There I was in for an unpleasant surprise. The next flight to Minneapolis was not until the next day, and it cost a lot more than I had expected. Almost $800. I had a little over $900 left after buying the bus ticket and lunch. I stood in front of the flight schedule board, feeling despair come over me in a wave. I could buy a ticket, but then I'd have virtually no money left for food and transportation in Minneapolis. What if the flight to Fargo is just as expensive? "Can I help you?" A voice came from behind me. I turned around. Standing in front of me was an older woman in an airport employee's uniform. "Yeah, I'm trying to get home," I said. "West Fargo, North Dakota. But flights are very expensive and I'm on a tight budget." She nodded sympathetically. "Yes, in the high season, the prices bite. But there may be alternatives. Have you considered the bus option?" "A bus? To North Dakota?" "Yeah, there's a Portland to Chicago to Minneapolis to Fargo. Takes 3 days, but it's a lot cheaper than airfare. 3 days on a bus didn't sound very appealing, but I had no choice." "Where can I find out more information?" She walked me to the bus company's information desk, located right inside the airport building. Indeed, a ticket to Fargo via Chicago and Minneapolis cost only $230. The bus was leaving in 4 hours. I bought the ticket, feeling a huge sense of relief. At least now I had a concrete plan. I would get home, even if not as quickly as I would have liked. I spent the remaining time before departure in the small airport cafeteria, reflecting on my life and my relationship with my daughter. I remembered how Beatrice had been as a little girl, a smart, inquisitive girl with dimples in her cheeks when she smiled. How she would bring drawings for Daddy from school, how she would ask me to read to her before bedtime, how she would trustingly put her little hand in mine when we crossed the road. When did things change? In adolescence? In college? Or later, when she met Thornton? I remembered how she'd brought him to meet us. Lavinia immediately disliked her future son-in-law, though she tried not to show it. There's something about him. Insincere, she told me later. I brushed it off then, thinking it was just maternal jealousy. No one would be good enough for her girl. Now I realized Lavinia was right. There really was something fake about Thornton. He always seemed too kind, too attentive, when it was to his advantage. At other times, he barely concealed his irritation and disdain. After the wedding, Beatrice became more and more like her husband. Her calls became shorter and less frequent. Her invitations to visit became more and more formal. When they had twins, Lavinia and I hoped it would bring us closer together, but the opposite happened. Beatrice and Thornton built a wall between us and the grandchildren, and then the requests for money started. Small amounts at first, for repairs, for vacations, for the children's school. Then bigger ones. I never said no, partly because I wanted to help my daughter, partly out of guilt. I thought I had made a mistake somewhere in her upbringing, and now I was trying to make up for it with financial support. The largest was a $50,000 contribution to their new home. Beatrice had come to me with this request shortly after Lavinia's death. "We want to move to a better neighborhood with good schools for the kids," she explained, "but we don't have enough for a down payment." I agreed without hesitation. Lavinia had left a substantial insurance policy, and I wanted that money to benefit the family. Plus, Beatrice had promised that I'd be put on the paperwork as a co-borrower, just in case, so you'd always have a place to come. I remembered the day we signed the papers in the lawyer's office. Beatrice was unusually affectionate, Thornton unusually friendly. I signed all the papers with barely a glance. I remember the lawyer asking if I was sure I wanted to be a co-borrower and not just give money as a gift. A co-borrower is liable on the mortgage but also has rights to an interest in the property, he explained. I nodded, not really getting into it. What did it matter if the house would still belong to my daughter and grandchildren after I died? Now, sitting in an airport cafeteria thousands of miles from home, I wondered for the first time, what exactly did I sign then? What was my legal status with regard to their home? I vaguely remember the phrase joint ownership in the documents. Did that mean I officially owned part of the house? This question kept me awake all 3 days as I jolted on a bus across half the country. I barely slept, getting off at stops just to stretch my legs and buy food, and I kept thinking about those papers, about the house, about Beatrice and Thornton. By the time the bus finally arrived in Fargo, I was exhausted physically, but my mind was working clearer than ever. I had a plan matured. It was about 15 kilometers from the bus station to my home in West Fargo. I spent the last of my money on a cab. The house greeted me with silence and the smell of dust. I'd been gone for almost a week. The first thing I did was check the house phone. The answering machine had 17 messages from Beatrice. In the first few, she'd asked if I was okay and why I hadn't been in touch. In the last few, her voice sounded worried, even scared. "Daddy, please call me as soon as you get this message. Thornton and I are very worried." I didn't bother to call back. Instead, I showered, changed into clean clothes, and headed to the bank. I needed to block a credit card and find out if there had been any transactions on it in the last few days. At the bank, I was met by Eleanor, the manager, who had handled my accounts for years. "Mr. Hollis," she exclaimed, "we were just trying to get in touch with you. Your daughter came by yesterday saying you lost your credit card while you were on vacation." "I didn't lose it," I replied calmly. "Beatrice took it without my knowledge and left me alone in Maine with no means of support." Eleanor looked shocked. But she said that you instructed her to block the card. That's a lie. I want to know if there have been any transactions on my card in the last week, and if so, which ones? She ran a quick check on my account. Yes, there have been several transactions. 3 days ago, a cash withdrawal from an ATM in Portland, $5,000. And yesterday, an attempted transfer of $20,000 to Beatrice Hollis's account, but it was declined because it exceeded the daily limit. I felt everything go cold inside. They hadn't just abandoned me, they were trying to empty my accounts. I want to block the card and issue a new one, I said, and renegotiate all access to my accounts. Beatrice shouldn't have any access. Of course, Mr. Hollis, Eleanor nodded. We'll do everything immediately. When I had finished with the bank, I went to Martin Caulfield, the lawyer who had helped me with the paperwork after Lavinia's death. His office was in the center of West Fargo, in an old brick building overlooking the city park. Oberon. Martin rose from his desk to shake my hand. What are you doing here? You look tired. Long story. I sank into the chair across from his desk. Martin, do you remember 8 months ago when you drew up the deeds to Beatrice and Thornton's house, where I was a co-borrower? Of course I remember. He nodded. A big house in the Maplewood neighborhood. I want to know what my legal status is with regard to that house. Do I own it? What are my rights? Martin looked at me carefully. Is something wrong? Yes, I told him briefly about the trip to Maine and how Beatrice and Thornton had abandoned me there. I want to know what I can do. Martin shook his head. A terrible story. Give me a minute, I'll find the documents. He opened a file cabinet drawer, went through several folders, and pulled out one. Here. He flipped through a few pages. According to this deed, you are part owner of the house along with Beatrice and Thornton. The three of you are equal owners. Equal shares. I was surprised. I thought I was just a co-borrower on the mortgage. No, Martin shook his head. You're a full owner of 1/3 of the house. What's more, he turned the page, there's a clause that says that any decisions regarding the sale or transfer of ownership must be made unanimously by all three owners. I felt a strange warmth spill inside. Not gloating, no, more like a sense of justice restored. So, I said slowly, I can sell my share? Or even initiate the sale of the whole house? Yes, Martin nodded. You can sell your share to anyone you want. Or, if you find a buyer for the whole house, you can initiate the sale process. Beatrice and Thornton could refuse to sell their shares, but then the case could go to court to force a division of the property. I leaned back in my chair, pondering this information. I own 1/3 of their house, the house they never once invited me into after I gave them the money for the down payment. The house that houses the people who abandoned me in a foreign city thousands of miles away from home, taking my papers and trying to steal my money. Martin, I said after a pause, I want to sell my share. Immediately. Sell your share? Martin asked, looking at me carefully. To whom? I wondered. Really? Who would want to buy 1/3 of a house where other people live? What if I sold the whole house? I asked. You said I could initiate the sale. Martin chewed his lip, thinking. Technically, yes. As a co-owner, you have the right to initiate the sale, but Beatrice and Thornton might not agree, and then the matter would go to court. It's a long process. I have time, I replied. What's the first thing to do? Get a realtor to appraise the house. Then write a formal notice to Beatrice and Thornton of your intention to sell the property. I can prepare all the necessary documents. I nodded. Is there a realtor you can recommend? Yeah, Veronica Page. She's been working with real estate in that area for years. She's very competent. He wrote the realtor's name and phone number on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Thank you, Martin. There's one more thing. I hesitated. Beatrice and Thornton keep their second car in my garage. Technically it's theirs, but I paid part of the price and my name's on the paperwork. Can I sell it? Martin went back to the file cabinet. Let me remember. Oh, here. Yeah, is that the red SUV? Legally, you're a co-owner because your name's on the registration papers. But it's going to be hard to sell without their consent. What if we could find a loophole? I wasn't going to back down. Martin rubbed his chin thoughtfully. There is one option. If the car is on your property for more than 6 months without moving, you can file an abandoned property claim. But you have to prove that you tried to contact the owners. They haven't returned my calls for many months. That was the truth. And the car has been sitting in my garage for over a year. In that case, there's a chance. You have to file the proper paperwork with the DMV. If everything goes smoothly, in 30 days, you could have the right to sell it. I nodded, mentally ticking off another item in my retaliation plan. One last question. Beatrice and I have a joint bank account. I opened it when she was in college to send her tuition money. We never closed it. Can I withdraw money from it? Martin frowned. If it's a joint account with equal access rights, then legally yes. But I'd recommend caution. If there's money in there that clearly belongs to Beatrice, I've been transferring $500 there every month for the last 5 years, I interrupted him. They never thanked me for it, just silently withdrew the money. I guess whatever's in there is mine. Martin shrugged his shoulders. In that case, you have every right to dispose of those funds. I thanked the lawyer and left his office with a clear plan of action. The first thing I did was to call Veronica Page. She agreed to meet with me the same day. Veronica was an energetic woman in her 50s with a keen eye and business acumen. She listened attentively to my story, without surprise or judgment. There have been other cases in my practice, she said when I had finished. Well, let's take a look at the house. Do you have the keys? I shook my head. No, but I have the title deeds. That's enough to get us started. We can check the exterior and then I'll contact your daughter and son-in-law to arrange an interior inspection. They're not back from their trip yet, are they? Not that I know of. We agreed to meet in an hour at Beatrice and Thornton's house. I went home, got all the necessary paperwork, and headed for the Maplewood neighborhood. The house looked impressive, a 2-story house with a manicured lawn and a stone walkway leading to the front door. Veronica was already waiting for me, taking notes in her clipboard. Great location, she said when she saw me. The neighborhood is very sought after by families with children. The schools nearby are some of the best in the city. We walked the perimeter of the house. Veronica looked at the facade, the backyard with a pergola and barbecue, and the 2-car garage. I'd estimate it at about $700,000, she said, having finished the inspection. But you'd have to look inside to get a more accurate estimate. $700,000. I did the math. My share is about $230,000. That's not a bad sum. What's next? I asked. I will prepare the documents to initiate the sale. You'll have to sign them. Then we'll formally notify the other owners. They'll have 30 days to respond. If they agree to the sale, great. If they don't, we'll have to go to court. I'm open to either option, I said firmly. When I got home, I decided to tackle the next item in my plan, Thornton's car. A red late-model Ford Explorer SUV stood in my garage, covered in a thin layer of dust. Thornton had bought it 2 years ago, but for some reason he preferred to keep it at my place. Maybe he didn't want the neighbors to see that they had 2 expensive cars. It might raise questions about their income. I found the registration papers for the car. Indeed, my name was listed second to Thornton's. I remembered how my son-in-law had asked me to sign the papers, explaining that there were some tax benefits. I didn't bother to look into it. I just signed as I always did when Beatrice or Thornton asked for something. The next day, I went to the DMV with an abandoned property claim. The process was surprisingly simple. I filled out the forms, provided proof that the car had been on my property for more than 6 months, and confirmed that I had attempted to contact the owners multiple times. I was told that a decision would be made within 30 days. Having done with that, I went to the bank. A joint account with Beatrice had been set up back in the days when she was in college. At the time, it seemed like a convenient way to send her money for tuition and living expenses. After graduation, I offered to close the account, but Beatrice insisted on keeping it just in case. This just in case came every month when I transferred money there, and Beatrice withdrew it, without a word, without gratitude. I had long since stopped wondering what she was spending it on. Eleanor met me again at the bank. "Mr. Hollis, that's twice in one day," she smiled. "What else can I do for you?" "I want to check the balance and transactions on the joint account with Beatrice," I said. Eleanor nodded and turned to the computer. "The current balance is $27,400, she said. "The last transaction was your transfer of $500 a week ago, $27,000. I was surprised. Usually, Beatrice withdrew the money almost immediately after my transfer. Apparently, she hadn't done so in recent months. Perhaps she'd forgotten about the account, or had another source of income. "I want to close this account and transfer the money to my personal account," I said. Eleanor hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure, Mr. Hollis? It's a joint account, and it usually requires the consent of all the owners to close it." "I opened this account. I've been depositing money into it all these years," I said firmly. "If there are any legal impediments, I'm willing to sign any documents taking responsibility for it." Eleanor checked the account information again. Indeed, according to the transaction history, all the deposits were made from your side. In that case, you have the right to close the account. But I must warn you, your daughter can challenge this decision. "Let her try," I answered. "I am ready to provide all the necessary proof that the money belongs to me." The process of closing the account took about an hour. I had to sign several documents confirming my decision and taking responsibility for any possible claims from Beatrice. In the end, $27,400 was transferred to my personal account. As I left the bank, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if I had broken another thread that bound me to my daughter and son-in-law, a thread that had long ago become a heavy chain. I spent the next 2 weeks actively looking for a new place to live. My home, though cozy, was full of memories, of Lavinia, of Beatrice the child, of happy times that would never return. Besides, Beatrice knew the address, and I wanted to disappear from her life completely. I found a small but bright apartment in a new development on the other side of town. The neighborhood was quiet, with lots of parks and a lake nearby. The rent was quite reasonable, $1,200 a month, including utilities. The owner of the apartment, a man about my age named Silas, was a pleasant conversationalist. He lived next door and rented out several apartments in the complex. "You know, Mr. Hollis, I don't usually rent to people who are older," he admitted during our first meeting. "Too many problems, blood pressure, heart problems. But you look strong. And you have honest eyes." I smiled. "Thank you for your kind words. I promise not to be a bother." We signed a 1-year lease with an option to renew. I paid the first and last month's rent and got the keys. The move only took 2 days. I decided to leave most of my furniture and belongings in the old house. They were part of my past life. I took only the essentials with me: clothes, a few books, pictures of Lavinia, a computer, and some kitchen utensils. Everything else I planned to buy again. New life, new things. Along with the move, I was in the process of changing my contact information. First, I changed my phone number, choosing an operator I had never used before. Then I created a new email address. I had used the previous one for over 10 years and it was known to Beatrice. I updated the information in all the important places: the bank, the insurance company, the medical offices. Everywhere I put a new address, a new phone number, new mail, nowhere leaving a trail that could lead back to me. The last step was to disconnect the home phone at the old house. Before doing so, I listened to all the messages from Beatrice. Over 30 of them had accumulated. Her voice was becoming increasingly anxious, even panicked. In the last messages, she threatened to go to the police if I didn't get in touch. I wasn't moved by that. I just erased all the messages and called the phone company to disconnect the line. 3 weeks after I returned from Maine, two important events occurred. First, the DMV granted my abandoned property claim and issued me paperwork, allowing me to sell Thornton's car. Second, Veronica Page reported that she had found a potential buyer for the house who was willing to pay $720,000. "That's a very good offer," she said, "especially since the buyer is willing to act quickly. But we still need Beatrice and Thornton's approval. Have they received the notice yet?" "Yes, I sent it by registered mail to the address of the house. But there's no reply yet." I nodded. Most likely Beatrice and Thornton hadn't returned from their trip yet. Or they had, but they were too busy looking for me to pay attention to official letters. The next day I went to the car dealership to sell Thornton's SUV. I chose a dealership in a neighboring town to minimize the chances of anyone recognizing the car. The used car repurchase manager, a young man named Brandon, took a close look at the SUV. "Excellent condition," he said. "Low mileage, only 20,000 miles. I can offer you 42,000. I knew Thornton had paid about 60,000 for the car 2 years ago, but 42,000 was a reasonable price for a used car." "It's a deal," I said. It took about 2 hours to finalize the deal. I provided all the necessary paperwork, including the DMV's decision to declare the car an abandoned property. Brandon wrote me a check for $42,000, which I immediately took to the bank. Back in my new apartment, I felt a strange satisfaction. The revenge plan was beginning to bear fruit. I had sold Thornton's car, emptied the joint account, and soon I might be selling their house. All the threads that bound me to my daughter and son-in-law were severed. A new address, a new phone number, new mail. I sat in a chair by the window overlooking the lake, sipping tea, and reflected on how my life had changed over the past month. The pain and resentment hadn't disappeared, but they had transformed into something else, into determination, into a desire for justice. The next day, I got a call from Veronica. "Mr. Hollis, I have news. The buyer insists on closing the deal as soon as possible. He's willing to increase the offer to $75,000 if we close within a week." "What about Beatrice and Thornton's consent?" "The notice period expires in 3 days. If they don't respond, we can take legal action to force a sale. Given the circumstances and the fact that you are a full co-owner, the chances of a favorable decision are very high." I wondered. Litigation meant additional costs and time, but on the other hand, the buyer was offering an excellent price. "Let's go ahead with the plan," I decided. "If Beatrice and Thornton don't respond by the deadline, we'll start legal proceedings." "Great," Veronica said. "I'll contact you as soon as I have news." 3 days later, Beatrice and Thornton still had not responded to the notice. Veronica initiated court proceedings to force the sale. "It's going to take some time," she warned. "But all things considered, I'm pretty sure the court will be on our side." I nodded. I had time. But Beatrice and Thornton, when they finally returned and found their house for sale, would have much less time. Life in the new apartment was slowly getting better. I bought the furniture I needed, made the space my own. I got to know my neighbors, mostly elderly couples or single people my age. We sometimes met in the common courtyard, discussed the weather, shared news. None of them knew my story. To them, I was just Oberon, a widower who had recently moved from another neighborhood. It gave a sense of freedom that I hadn't experienced in a long time. A week after the legal process was initiated, I got a call from Veronica. "Mr. Hollis, I have some unexpected news. Beatrice and Thornton have come forward. They contacted me through their attorney. I'm tense." "What are they saying?" They claim you're incapacitated and have no right to your share of the house. Their lawyer provided some medical documents supposedly confirming the early stages of dementia. I felt my anger boiling up inside of me. That's a lie. I haven't had any medical tests for dementia. That's what I thought, Veronica said. Don't worry, we can easily disprove these claims. You will have to undergo an independent medical examination to prove your competence. I'm willing to undergo any tests, I said firmly. Good. I'll contact several specialists and arrange for the examination. In the meantime, the sale is on hold until the question of your legal capacity is resolved. After my conversation with Veronica, I sat looking out the window at the lake for a long time. So that was their plan. They wanted to declare me incompetent so they could gain control of my finances. Going to Maine was part of that plan. Perhaps they wanted to create a situation where I would look confused, unable to take care of myself. But their plan failed. Not only had I returned home on my own, but I had taken over the initiative. Now they were trying to get even by providing fake medical documents. Well, I'll win that battle too. And then I would take what was rightfully mine. My share of the house they never thought was mine, even though I had invested not only money in it, but hopes for a family happiness that never came. It's been almost 2 months since I returned from Maine. An independent medical examination had fully confirmed my capacity. 3 different specialists, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a gerontologist, agreed that I was of sound mind and memory. Their opinions were submitted to the court, and Beatrice and Thornton's attempt to have me declared incompetent failed. Court proceedings to force the sale of the house were resumed. The buyer, fortunately, did not back out of the deal, although he reduced the offer to $700,000 because of the delay. I agreed to that price. After all, it wasn't so much about money as principle. That morning I sat in a cafe near the courthouse, waiting for a call from Veronica. Today was supposed to be the final hearing in the forced sale case. I didn't go to court. I didn't want to meet Beatrice and Thornton. Veronica represented my interests. The phone rang at 11 sharp. Mr. Hollis? Veronica's voice sounded excited. The court has ruled in our favor. The forced sale has been approved. The house will be sold for $700,000 and your share will be $233,333.33. I felt the tension I'd been carrying around all these weeks begin to let go. Thank you, Veronica. You did a great job. Beatrice and Thornton are furious, she continued. They screamed in the courtroom, threatened to appeal, but the judge was adamant. They have 30 days to vacate the house. And if they refuse, then the eviction proceedings will be initiated. But I don't think it will come to that. Their lawyer seems to be a reasonable man. He should explain to them that further resistance will only make things worse. I nodded, though Veronica couldn't see it through the phone. When will the deal be closed? As soon as they vacate the house. The buyer is willing to act quickly. I think within a month to a month and a half, it will be finalized. That's great. Thanks again for everything. I hung up the phone and took a sip of my already cold coffee. Strangely, I felt neither triumph nor gloating, just a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. I paid and left the cafe. It was a clear, sunny day. I decided to walk to my apartment, enjoying the good weather and a sense of accomplishment. But fate had it differently. I had only gone a block when I heard a sharp squeal of brakes. A black SUV stopped right in front of me, blocking the road. The door swung open and Beatrice jumped out of the car. Behind her, a little slower, came Thornton. My daughter looked as if she had aged 10 years. Her eyes were red, her hair a mess, her clothes wrinkled. Thornton seemed more collected, but there was so much hatred in his gaze that I took an involuntary step back. "You!" Beatrice literally spat the word out. "How could you?" I looked back. We were standing in the middle of a busy street, attracting the attention of passers-by. "I think we should find a better place to talk," I said calmly. "Talk?" Beatrice was almost shouting. You sold our house. You stole our car. You took our money. What kind of conversation can we have?" Thornton put his hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her down. "B, not here. People are watching." That cooled her fervor a little. She took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. "Okay." Her voice was still shaking with rage. "Where do you want to go? To your new home? The one you didn't even tell us about?" I shook my head. "There's a cafe around the corner. It's quiet enough." Beatrice nodded, and we headed toward the cafe. Thornton followed behind, as if afraid I might run away. We found a table in the far corner, away from the other customers. The waitress brought menus, but neither of us was interested in eating. I ordered only tea. Beatrice and Thornton declined everything. As soon as the waitress stepped away, Beatrice exploded again. "How could you do this to us? We're your family. We took care of you." I looked at my daughter calmly. "Cared? You call that caring? You abandoned me in a strange city thousands of miles from home, took my papers and my credit card, tried to steal my money." "We didn't abandon you," Beatrice exclaimed. "We went back to the cottage and you weren't there. We looked all over town for you. We called every hospital, every police station." "After you withdrew $5,000 from my card and tried to transfer 20 more to your account," I said. Beatrice blushed. "It was for your own safety. We saw you getting confused, forgetting things. We wanted to make sure you didn't spend all the money on something stupid." I shook my head. "Don't lie, Beatrice. You've always been a bad liar. You tried to declare me incompetent so you could gain control of my finances. Going to Maine was part of that plan." Thornton, who had been silent up to that point, finally spoke up. "Even so, does that justify what you did? You sold our house, damn it. Where are we going to live now?" "It was my house too," I replied calmly. "I paid the down payment. I was listed on the deed as an equal owner, but you never invited me in once after you bought it." "Because you were always busy," Beatrice blurted out. "Always making excuses." "That's not true, and you know it. I called you every week. I offered to come over for dinner, for the weekend. You always said no." Beatrice looked away. At that moment my tea arrived. I took a sip, giving my daughter and son-in-law time to process my words. "What now?" Beatrice finally asked. "Are you satisfied? Ruined our lives?" "I didn't ruin your life," I replied. "You'll get $466,666.66 from the sale of the house, your 2/3. That's enough for a down payment on a new house." "It's not about the money." Beatrice was starting to get agitated again. "This is about you betraying us, your family." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, Beatrice, it was you who betrayed me. Years ago, when you started treating me like an ATM machine instead of a father, when you stopped inviting me to visit, when you decided you could just take my money and get rid of me." Thornton snorted. "Oh, come on, Oberon. You've always been complicated. Always dissatisfied with everything, always knowing better. B's just tired of being lectured by you." "I never lectured her," I countered. "I just wanted to be a part of her life, to see her grandchildren grow up, to be there for her in the big moments." "You've always been around money," Thornton said caustically. "And only with money." I didn't say anything. What was the use of explaining? They only saw what they wanted to see. "Daddy," Beatrice's tone changed suddenly, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Let's forget all this. Let's start over. You don't want to be alone, do you? Without your family?" I smiled sadly. "I'm already alone, Beatrice. I've been alone for years, ever since your mother died and you decided you didn't need your old father anymore." "That's not true," she was almost crying. "I've always taken care of you." "No," I shook my head. "You took care of my money, and you do now. You're not worried about me being alone. You're afraid you won't be able to get a dime from me anymore." Beatrice jumped up, her face contorted with anger. You monster! A cold, heartless monster! No wonder Mama was always complaining about you, that you never understood her, never supported her." I froze. "Lavinia? Complained about me? What are you talking about? She called me almost every day. Beatrice looked at me with triumphant gloating. Told me how indifferent you were, how you ignored her, how sorry she was that she had married you. I felt something inside me break. Lavinia? My Lavinia, with whom we lived 42 happy years. It can't be. You're lying, I said quietly. Why do you think I stopped coming? Beatrice continued. I couldn't see the way you were treating her, as if she were just a furniture in the house. I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts. This couldn't be true. Lavinia always said she was happy with me. We never had a serious fight, always found a compromise. She loved me, I knew it. And then I realized. Beatrice was desperate to hurt me, to hit me where it hurt the most, my love for Lavinia. She knew that I carried that love through my life, that the memories of my wife were the most precious thing I had left. I opened my eyes and looked at my daughter calmly. That's enough, Beatrice. We both know it's a lie. Your mother loved me as I loved her. Our marriage was not perfect. No marriage is perfect. But we were happy together. You think so, she snorted, because you never listened to her, never saw her suffer. I shook my head. I won't discuss it. I won't let you tarnish your mother's memory just to hurt me. Thornton, who had been watching the scene with a kind of grim satisfaction, finally intervened. All right, enough drama. Let's get back to business. You sold our house. What do you want in return? You want us to apologize? Okay, I'm sorry we left you in Maine. It was stupid. We weren't thinking. I looked at him in surprise. Did he really think a simple sorry was enough? I don't want anything from you, I said. No apology, no explanation. I just want you to leave me alone. Leave you alone, Beatrice interjected. You're our father. We're family. No, Beatrice. We haven't been family for a long time. A family doesn't abandon each other in a strange town. A family doesn't steal money. A family doesn't try to have its members declared incompetent for profit. It wasn't for profit, she exclaimed. We wanted to protect you. From what? I asked. From being able to control your own money? From the freedom to decide how to live your life? Beatrice couldn't find an answer. Thornton put his hand on her shoulder. Come on, Bea. It's no use. He won't listen. I finished my tea and put the cup on the table. Goodbye, Beatrice Thornton. I hope you find a good home, and I hope we never see each other again. You can't cut us out of your life so easily. Beatrice was indignant. We are your family. Hazel and Reginald are your grandchildren. Grandchildren. I haven't seen in 3 years, I pointed out, who don't even call on Christmas or birthdays. No, Beatrice. I've been out of your life for a long time. It's just that now I've made it official. I stood up, left the money for my tea, and headed for the exit. Beatrice jumped up, blocking my path. You're going to regret this, she hissed. When you die alone with no family around, you'll regret it. I stepped around her and said calmly, No, Beatrice. I'd be sorry if I kept clinging to the illusion of a family that didn't really exist. Goodbye. I left the cafe without looking back. I walked down the street, breathing in the fresh air, feeling lighter with each step. It was as if I had dropped a heavy weight that I had been carrying for many years. When I got back to the apartment, I sat in a chair by the window looking at the lake. The sun was setting, coloring the water with golden tones. It was peaceful on my soul, like I hadn't been in a long time. Sure, Beatrice's words about Lavinia had hurt me, but I knew it was a lie. My wife loved me as I loved her. We had our difficult moments, as in any long marriage, but we always overcame them together. Beatrice was just trying to hit a sore spot, and I wouldn't let her do it. A month later, the house was officially sold. My share, $233,333.33, went into my account. Together with the money from the sale of Thornton's car and the funds from the joint account, I had just over $300,000, more than enough to live comfortably at my age. I didn't know what Beatrice and Thornton had done with their share. I didn't know where they lived, what they did, and I didn't want to know. That chapter of life was closed to me. Sometimes, of course, I thought about my grandchildren. Hazel and Reginald must be graduating from college by now. I hadn't seen them in so long that I would hardly recognize them when I met them. Sometimes I wondered if Beatrice and Thornton had told them what had happened. And if so, in what version? They probably pictured me as a crazy old man who had sold their house out of spite or senile dementia. But that didn't bother me. I knew the truth, and lived in peace with that truth. My life in my new apartment was quiet, measured. I made a few acquaintances among the neighbors, elderly people just like me. We would sometimes get together to play cards or just talk. None of them knew my story, and I preferred to keep it that way. One day, about 6 months after the house was sold, I received a letter, a plain paper letter, no return address. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar. Inside was a postcard of the ocean, the same coastline in Maine where I'd been with Beatrice and Thornton. On the back were just a few words. "Thank you for the truth, Hazel." I stared at that postcard for a long time, not knowing what to think. Hazel? My granddaughter? How did she know where I lived? And what did she mean by the truth? Maybe Beatrice and Thornton had told the children what had happened after all? Or did Hazel find out some other way? And why was she thanking me? I thought about writing back, but realized I didn't know where to send the letter. There was no return address on the postcard. In the end, I just put the postcard in the desk drawer where I kept Lavinia's pictures and a few memorabilia. Maybe someday I'd find out what Hazel meant, or maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter that much anymore. What matters is that I'm finally at peace, free of the toxic relationships that had poisoned my life for years, no longer clinging to the illusion of a family that didn't really exist. Sitting in a chair by the window overlooking the lake, I thought about how strangely life works. Sometimes you have to lose something precious, your home, your family, your illusions, to gain something more important: freedom, peace of mind, self-respect. I didn't know what the future would bring. At my age, it didn't promise to be long, but I knew I would live my remaining years at peace with myself, and that was enough.